Ever heard of a game called The Depths? Not surprising if you haven't, it was never released to the public. Bootleg copies were spread in the United States from roughly 2006 to 2007, before being completely gone by 2008. To date, only few people have reported knowing of the game, and even fewer have actually played it. It is still unknown who developed the game, or where it came from, for details are not found anywhere in the installed files. No one has ever reported finished the game, due to the gratuitous amounts of scarring images portrayed, and the trauma that followed. The following is a description of The Depths, from those who have played it. The users who successfully installed the game said that after installation, their computers never functioned the same. Freezes, blue screens, and corrupted files were common after playing. The only way to remove the game was to wipe your hard drive. There was no deleting of the files, no uninstalling, nothing. It would just stay on your computer, never leaving. Some users even reported seeing the file being duplicated to different parts of their computer, a cloning of sorts, making the file appear in unwanted folders. The setting of the game is supposedly a mountaintop, as it is a snowy environment, and whenever the player would walk too far, they would fall and die. Not much can be seen in the beginning, just snow. An endless display of falling snow. This is what frustrated players the most. They tried walking in every direction but only found more snow until finally, they would fall off the endless array of white, and die. This is where most players stopped playing, although the persistent gamers found an alternative. It took multiple deaths but players eventually found where they are supposed to go, down. As soon as you spawn, you can look down and see a bolted door. Opening it takes you to the next sequence of the game. As soon as you open the door, the player starts to fall into a pit of darkness. It is pitch black, and all that can be heard is the sounds of wind as you fall. After about 20 seconds of non-stop falling, you see a light at the end of the tunnel. The player reaches the bottom of the pit, and as the player touches down, a scream can heard. The player is now in a large room with no doors, no exits, just the light next to them, and the tunnel above them. The walls are covered in blood, the light is flickering, and sounds of faint mumbling are playing the background. This area is where most players quit, either out of boredom, or fear. There is nothing the player can do at this point, just walk around the room, looking for whatever it is they are supposed to do next. More sounds start to play while walking. Sounds like wind blowing, water dripping, and growling. Players usually hear the growling behind them, and in fright, turn around rather quickly. When the player turns around, they see for a split second, a dark figure run away into the darkness of the room. This occurs every time the player makes a sudden look behind them. Touching the dimly lit walls makes the game freeze for a moment, before returning to normal. More and more sounds start to become audible and eventually, piano banging and screaming become more and more frequent. The volume of the noises increases over time, and some users try to mute their sound, but can't. The noises just keep playing over and over, until they are at an ear-piercingly high level. All the players at this point experienced the same thing. Their games flashed, their mouse would not work, and the room would suddenly be full of dead bodies. Lifeless corpses, flashing out of nowhere, surround the room, piling up until the player is practically covered in bodies. Each one of the corpses is mumbling indistinguishable words. Their mouths blurred nonsense while their eyes appear to be open, but are pitch black. The player is forced to stay at these talking corpses for they are stuck, and cannot move. The only thing they can do is look around them, to see the bodies staring at them, and talking in a foreign, demonic tone. At this point, the player is unable to pause, or even close the game. They can only look and see the corpses speak to the player in gibberish words. This only happened for a short period of time, but by this point, the remaining users had already shut down their computer. The corpses start to eventually chant their nonsense in unison with the other dead bodies. In one last scream, they all spread their mouths wide open, to impossible lengths. It looks as if their jaws should break as they all scream at an alarmingly high volume. The collective screams of the bodies gets louder and louder, and more distorted. As soon as the scream becomes ear-wrenchingly unstandable, the screen cuts to black, and the screams suddenly stop. This darkness lasts for a very long time. The player starts to hear someone laughing close to them. The laugh is off though, it sounds as if someone has messed with the audio. The laugh gets closer and closer until finally, it ends with one final ha, playing loudly. This noise is accompanied by a picture of an old man's face, crippled with age, and taking up nearly the entire screen. He has his mouth wide open, smiling. This frame only appears for a split second however, and afterwards, the darkness ends. Although there is only a slither of light, the player can look down, and see their body tied to a wooden pole. This part of the game is what the users described as the worst. The light above them, shining onto the player, is confined to a small circle around the player. Small shadows start fading in and out of this circle on the ground, shadows of what look like mangled and distorted bodies. Finally, footsteps are heard. The old man from the photo can be seen in full now as he walks towards your pinned body. He is short, bald, his face is down, and is wearing only ripped pants. His torso is almost completely torn in half. The only thing keeping his body from not splitting in two is the thread of skin connecting his neck to his head. His left leg is replaced with a long, rusty, metal tube. As he inches towards you with scissors in his hands, the scraping of the tube against the floor gives the player a nails on a chalkboard feeling in their ears. When he is right next to you, he looks up, and the player can see his face in full. The man's face looks the same as it did when it flashed before. His eyes seem to be missing, and his mouth is open, smiling. It is covered in blood, blood that looks days old and dried out. He starts rotating his head as he stares at you with his mouth open. The player can only look around them, unable to move. The man lifts up his crippled arm, holding scissors, and jams them into your trapped body. Blood spurts out of your body in abnormally large amounts. The few players who experienced this scene described it as horrifyingly realistic. The man then takes the scissors, and brings them up to your neck, leaving a zipper-like effect on your chest. The player's body is cut wide open and guts pour out all over the old man's torso. He then removes the scissors, reaches to the floor, and picks up a mirror. He turns the mirror towards you. Although the player's face cannot be seen in the mirror, the player's chest, now cut in half, can be seen in its full gruesomeness. The man then drops the mirror, reaches down once more, and picks up an axe. He swings the axe at the pole you are tied to, multiple times, until you and the pole you are attached to, fall to the ground. The player is now staring at the ceiling, while listening to the old man laugh. He kneels down in front of your face, mouth still open, and lets out one last ha. He then stands up, walks around the player with his axe in hand, dragging his metal leg across the floor as he walks. When he reaches the player's feet, he lets out 3 words in a disgusting, repulsive voice. Just. Like he raises the axe above his head, stares at you, and rotates his head. He yells his final words as he strikes the axe down into your knee. Me. The game continued. Few players remained up to this point. After the old man has chopped off your leg, he continues to laugh and turn his head. The blood from your wound sprays all over his split torso while all the player can do is look around and see their mangled corpse, tied to the blood-stained pole. The man then drops his axe. He comes right to your face, kneels down, and opens his mouth to impossible lengths. He seems to swallow you. The game stutters for a moment as the old man's mouth is all that can be seen by the player. Instead of cutting to darkness this time, you are instantly placed in another scene, this time in a long, dark hallway, lit only by torches on the walls. The player is limping. The player can only walk in one direction, forward, towards the end of what seems like an infinite hallway. With each step the player takes, the camera shakes and gets blurry, until finally, nothing can be made out except dim circles of light. Through this blurriness a small figure is seen in the distance. It looks like the same figure seen in the shadows of the room before. It is disfigured and deformed. Instantly, the figure then jumps into the player's view, as the screen becomes clear once more. From the few players that remained, each one reported seeing a different figure jump towards them. It was, to each of them though, horrifying. The fear they felt in that one moment was indescribable, so overwhelming that nearly all of them quit the game at that very moment. The users who played that scene reported that the game had short-term effects on their mental health, but no long-term repercussions. No user has played past that point,